While Elden Ring does a lot of things right, its combat system is arguably its best feature. While infamous for being challenging to the point of turning off some casual players, it's actually pretty incredible. To start with, it's important to mention the eye, or invulnerability frames, worked into the roll action, and to some degree, the jump action. These functions are probably the most important element to the highly variable skill cap the game possesses. If you can consistently time your dodges to be invulnerable when an enemy attacks, you'll greatly improve your success in battle. Pro tip: it's typically best to roll into an enemy attack to make sure the attack passes beyond you by the time your iframes run out. Some of the best players post videos where they beat the hardest late game bosses wearing no equipment and having not leveled their character at all. While accomplishing this feat is impossible for 99.9% of players, and probably required hundreds of attempts from the few skilled that can do it, it is fairly unique in that it would be impossible to do in almost all other games. For example, the difference in skill and ability for someone like me, who had never played a Souls game, to now having 200 plus hours under my belt is astounding. As a new player, I could barely beat the easiest enemies in the game with my starting equipment. Now, I wouldn't have much trouble taking on some of the early game mini-bosses with the same low-level gear. Learning how to get good, as they say in Souls game circles, is a uniquely rewarding experience. And while there was a lot of frustration along the way, the amount of joy I got from finally beating a tough boss that had killed me 10 times previously was some of the peak emotion I'd experienced while playing a video game. And honestly, what more can you ask from a game than to bring out your most intense emotions? The next important elements of combat are the core mechanics, like knowing when to run, what direction to move, when to roll, or when or if to block or parry. In terms of moving strategically, one key skill is maintaining distance where you are outside enemy attack range, but close enough to strike back when they miss. A second is circling around behind enemies. Hitting enemies from behind will do bonus damage, and when right up close to them, often results in a critical strike that does even more damage, knocks the enemy down, and leaves you invulnerable while performing the motion. Beyond movement, having a shield in one hand or dual-wielding a larger weapon gives you access to blocking. If you're a more defensive player, there's a generic pattern of blocking and counterattacking light attacks, particularly if they aren't part of a combo that will interrupt your counter-strike, while rolling out of the way of larger ones. Trying to block a heavy attack will deplete your stamina, can stun you, and leave you open for potential big damage follow-ups. This makes it so that all classes must get good by knowing how to properly take advantage of well-timed rolls and iframes. As alluded to, stamina is an important resource to manage properly in combat. It is represented by a green bar that will show on the top left screen along with your health and mana. Doing most actions in combat, like attacking, jumping, dodging, running, consume stamina. Not surprisingly, heavy attacks require more stamina, as does swinging a heavier weapon. The most draining action on stamina, however, is blocking. This is especially true if you are hit with a heavy attack while blocking. Also important is that keeping a shield or weapon lifted by holding block with L1 will result in your stamina replenishing many multiples slower than doing nothing. This slowed stamina recovery effect also applies when drinking potions. All of this means that players can't simply go on an all-out rampage of combo attacks, continuously run away from an enemy, nor simply tank shot after shot while hiding behind a shield. Players must pick and choose when to run, when to block, when to attack, and when to recharge stamina, making it a very strategic and often overlooked element of successful combat. One other thing worth mentioning is that Elden Ring has a fairly long window where actions will be queued. That means that if you panic upon seeing an enemy attack while you're in the middle of an attack animation and slam the roll button 3 times, not only will you still get hit, but after being hit and taking damage, you might roll once or twice after. This means you need to be very calm and intentional about when and how many times you hit your buttons to make sure you don't accidentally queue up an action that will be irrelevant or counterproductive by the time it executes. An added benefit to counter-striking, jump attacking, or attacking in quick succession is that these actions will fill up an enemy's invisible stagger gauge. Once broken, an enemy will become vulnerable for a few seconds, allowing you to attack them freely, and typically deliver a critical strike to an exposed weak point. Thus, a well-fought battle is a mix of blocking, counter-striking, dodging, managing stamina, manipulating enemy distance, striking from behind, jump attacking, and when executed properly, can feel like a real work of art.